What's up, world? My name's Chef Jean-Paul Bourgeois, and I'm in the Louisiana Cooking Test Kitchens, your authority for all things great out the Bayou State. Today, we're cooking one of my all-time favorite desserts, rice pudding. And the reason why I love rice pudding so much is because I always use leftover rice from a lot of my meals to make this dessert. In fact, I intentionally make too much rice when I'm making my gumbos and stews and so on, so I can make rice pudding. Now, this is going to be a very basic recipe for rice pudding. You can see all we have is some whole milk, some white sugar, vanilla bean, leftover rice, and a little turbinado sugar to garnish with. And the reason why I think this recipe is so helpful, because it really is great for all seasons of the year. It can be a warm rice pudding or it can be a cold rice pudding. The first thing we got to do is we got to get a pot ready to go, and that's very, very simple here. Again, this is a very simple recipe. It doesn't take too long. All the ingredients you can find, obviously, in your grocery store. I have a half a gallon of milk. Yes, I know this is a gallon size plastic jug, but it is halfway full. So we're gonna go with half a gallon of milk here. Seems like a lot of milk still. Anyways, get that out of the way. Now, before I add my sugar, I wanna bring my milk up to at least a good hot simmer. I don't want that sugar falling down to the bottom of the pot, sticking to the bottom of the pot, and then scorching or burning. That does not taste good. That is not a good recipe for rice pudding. Another really great ingredient here is vanilla bean. Of course, you can use vanilla extract. They also make like even dried vanilla seeds in there, but this is a full pod. And the way we deal with that is with a sharp knife. You want to kind of just come right down the middle. Try not to go through both sides of the pod. And then you can use your fingers to split that open like so. And you can see how I'm just opening that pod up. I'm putting it back down on my cutting board. And I'm taking my knife again, and I'm just scraping. Keep it open. Scraping that pod like so, and you get the seeds there. All right, you can do that for both sides. You got to give it a good scrape. Get all those seeds, and that is going to go into your milk along with the pod, because this pod's going to steep in that milk and kind of permeate all of that, and get all the remaining kind of seeds that you weren't able to scrape off. Just do your best to get all that kind of off of your cutting board and then your knife. Repeat the steps. You can use as little or as much vanilla bean as you want. Now, we're on high heat here, so I do want to make sure that I'm giving this a stir. One thing, you don't want to walk away from a pot with milk or cream in it. As soon as that comes up to a simmer, it boils fast, and it will boil over, and it's going to make a mess on your stove. So just make sure that you're paying attention to that, giving it a stir every now and then. When you start to see that to start to simmer really good, start dialing that fire down a bit. We're just gonna let that milk come up to a good simmer before we add that sugar. But for right now, all of our vanilla is in there. And we've got a good foundation for that rice pudding already. All right, we can see that our milk is starting to steam and froth a little bit. And so we're at a good point to where I can add that sugar. I did forget one little ingredient. It's not necessary, but a cinnamon stick will just kind of add a little bit of background kind of flavor in there. And really, all times of year, I think cinnamon's a good addition for rice pudding. Now, for those who don't know, Louisiana is a huge producer agriculturally of rice. So not only do we grow a lot of it, we eat a lot of it. And at every meal, there was a pot of steamed rice at our dinner table. And everything from, as you can see, desserts like rice pudding, or even, smothered corn, you eat on top of rice. There's rice and gravy. When you have a pot roast, you eat your gravy over rice. It was never really like mashed potatoes or pasta or anything like that. Rice was our main starch. It's what filled our bellies. It was the constant on our table. So we always had leftovers, again, which is why I like using leftover rice for this little recipe of rice pudding. So we got the sugar here. We're gonna just kind of stir that milk and then slowly add the white sugar to it. Just, again, don't want it to stick to the bottom where that flame is. We're still on high heat here. And, you know, this is not an overly sweet rice pudding. We're gonna finish it with a little turbinado sugar and kind of torch it like you would a creme brulee. So we're gonna add a little more sugar at the end as well. But again, I like this rice pudding as a way to use some seasonal ingredients throughout the year, whether it's citrus in the winter, or apples in the fall, or berries in the summer. And then, like I said, during the holiday season, you know, even like kind of eggnog spiced rice pudding works really well during Christmas. So while that still is coming up, I just want to give it a little taste here. I know I want to add a little salt. It's got a good sweetness. I'm gonna add about a teaspoon of salt to it. Not a lot, it's not a savory dish, obviously, but some of that salt will bring out those natural flavors of the vanilla and the cinnamon and even the milk. And of course the rice. All right, that's looking pretty good. I want this to come up just a little bit to a simmer before I add this rice. You can tell this rice is, you know, what we might call stale or dried, and that's a good thing because it's released all its moisture, and now I can add moisture back in through this milk process, so it's gonna really soak up a lot of what's happening in this pot right here. You'll see a lot of recipes that use half and half and cream and so on, and you can certainly do that. It will give you like a richer, more fatty rice pudding. Again, I like the lightness that milk gives as opposed to half and half or cream. And it's just one of those things that I don't need it for the thickness because the starches from the rice, as they start to break up and rehydrate and break up and kind of become half kernels and quarter kernels and so on, they're gonna thicken this quite a bit. One thing to keep in mind is if you're making a warm rice pudding, if that's how you want to serve it, make sure that in the pot it's at the consistency you need since you're gonna serve it warm. But if you wanna serve it cold, that mixture in this pot needs to be much thinner or looser because as you set it, as it cools, that's gonna seize up quite a bit and thicken. So just something to keep in mind as you think about, do I want it warm or hot rice pudding, or do I want it cold out the fridge? All right, we're gonna go ahead and add our rice, similar like you would in oatmeal. You know, you wanna add it kind of like a little bit at a time while you stir, then kind of keep it clump free. Let's see if I can get, there we go. Just a little bit at a time. And just gonna let that come up and let that rice do its thing. It's really gonna simmer here for a good, probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes. We're gonna see. You know, just really kind of depends on how cooked your rice is or how dried it is, how leftover it is. But really just wanna simmer it in this milk, allow those starches to come out and start to thicken this mixture. All right, so our rice pudding has been simmering for about 30 minutes. Now come take a look at this, Rohan. You can see that little bloop, 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 bloop. That's what we're looking at, and that's what we're looking for when it comes to the consistency of this rice pudding. Now, one little trick that I did do is I took this whisk and I kept stirring this rice pudding throughout the process, just agitating that rice, breaking it apart, really forcing those starches out of there, and that's where we're at right now. This is a good consistency for warm. You might want to thin this a little out when it comes to doing a cold rice pudding, but for what we want right now, I'm going to shut this off. It is ready to go, and just give it a nice good whisk. Again, making sure I'm kind of releasing some of that steam. Just giving that all that agitation, working those starches out. Ooh, that's looking mighty tasty right there. Let's give it a taste before we move on. You see how it's really just sticking to that spoon. And for warm rice pudding, that's what we're looking for. I mean, I love it like that. It's not overly sweet, but it's sweet enough just to satisfy that portion of your meal, you know, ending with something really good like that. So one way I like to do this, and this works for even cold or hot, is to, these are like creme brulee ramekins. And if you want to do it cold, this is a great thing to put them in. And, you know, in the fridge, you'd want to take some plastic wrap and go right on the top so it doesn't create a skin. I'm just going to fill 3 of them up here. That's if you're doing it cold. If you're doing it hot, you can just go in, you know, serve it just like this. Now, what I like to do, just to add just a touch more of like different kind of sweetness. This is called turbinado sugar. It's also known as sugar in the raw. It's a brown sugar, which really it just has a lot of its molasses still in it. So it has just a different kind of spunky sweet to it. It's used a lot for things like creme brulee. And then if you don't know, rice is a big crop for Louisiana, but sugarcane is even a bigger crop for Louisiana. So using something like this is actually goes hand in hand. And a lot of times those rice farms are butted up against sugarcane farms. Just put a nice little coating of turbinado sugar or sugar in the raw on top. And with a torch or in your broiler in your oven, but really a torch works best because you can get that high heat. Now, this one's better than the last one. I got it all the way on high and just give that rice pudding a nice torch. You can see that sugar in the raw melting away. It's gonna give the rice pudding a nice contrast, both in flavor and sweetness, but also texture, because that sugar that you're caramelizing will get crispy and crunchy right on top. All right, let's dig into this, guys. You can see, got a good little crisp on the bottom there. You can hear it. That puncture get through there. Ooh, it's still a little hot, huh? I mean, that's looking just the way you want it in terms of its consistency. It's pudding-like texture. You got to give that a blow. Oh yeah. Well, that's the stuff right there. Man, what a simple recipe and a perfect ending to all your meals. My name's Chef Jean-Paul Bourgeois. I am